Hello and welcome, fellow bookworms and film fans. In this week's episode, we will be discussing the fantastic thriller The Woman in Black. Now, the book itself is written by Susan Hill and it was published in 1983. And then we saw a film come to our silver screens in 2011. Now, I do also recognise that there is a stage production, which I myself have seen, and it is phenomenal, scared the hell out of me. But I will just be discussing the film as it is a book to film adaptation. Now, as always, we will be scaling it in 5 things. So we have got obviously your character representation, your setting, your overall plot, does the film stand in its own right, and of course, last but not least, how well does the film portray the actual book? Now, as usual, we will start with character representation. Now, the book and film are very different works. I just want to make this clear straight away. But I'm going to start off with obviously the characters in regards to this bit. Now, you do come across a very, very wide range of characters. The main ones you've got are Arthur Kipps, Sam Daly, Jerome, Keswick, I can't remember how you say his name, the village as a whole, which I will come back to that in a minute, and of course the titular character itself, the famed Woman in Black. Now, we're going to start off with character 1, Arthur Kipps. Now, he is a protagonist. He is, in the book, he's hardworking. He's almost carefree. He doesn't really believe in much. He's got a woman that he wants to marry, but because it's like a Victorian, Edwardian era, he's sort of like he's going it slowly. He's at the beginning of his career. He's climbing the ranks at his firm, and he's determined. He's alive. He's living. He's a very positive character. But at the beginning of the book, he is alive with a wife and stepchildren. Film, not so much. I will discuss that in a moment. Now, he in the beginning of the book, he is haunted due to his dealings with Ilmarsh House. But it doesn't destroy his life. It's just a part of his life that he's aware of and that he doesn't really speak of. But obviously within the book, it's him telling us everything that happened so that he can finally get rid of it from his system. Now, in the film, he's recently lost his wife, but he has a son right at the beginning of the film, which you'll understand later why that's not really in keeping with the book. But it's fine. He's dealing with bereavement. At his firm, he's almost like a joke. He gets sent off to Ilmarsh House as a punishment rather than a way to prove that he's partner material. He's sort of like he's got this deep, unsettled sort of like I've lost the love of my life feeling to him, and it tarnishes his character as he goes through. Which you don't really get that in the book. In the book, he deals with the Ilmarsh House and he understands that that's happened, but it doesn't tarnish who he is. Now, in the film, it ends with him losing his life, which is a huge difference. He lives happily in the book, but not in the film. Now you've got Sam Daly. Now, in the book, he's an interesting party to Arthur Kipps. He then becomes a friend, and he does help him. He ends up giving him a dog at one point. He's got a young, healthy son that's grown up and had kids of their own, so he's got grandkids. He cares for Arthur. He's a landlord in his own right. He's a very wealthy man. He's almost resented by the entire town because of how wealthy he is and the fact that he does own all this land. In the film, you don't see most of this in his character. You also see that they've killed off his son. You see his wife a lot more in the film as sort of like a medium for the spirit of their dead child. And this again tarnishes everything that Sam Daly does because he's lost this child to the Woman in Black. He also sees the Woman in Black, but in the book he never sees her. He never believes that she's a real thing. He's just sort of like he knows there's a superstition, but he doesn't admit that she is actually real. Now you come across Jerome. Now Jerome is Arthur's helper, as it were, in the village. He's the lawyer, and he's also lost his son. So he's very wary when Arthur mentions the woman in black. In fact, the first time Arthur mentions the woman in black, Jerome almost passes out in the street, but he won't tell Arthur why. He won't give any kind of information. He just sort of leaves it as that. He refuses to go over to the house at all. He's absolutely resolute in his, I'm never going near it. And that is true in the film as well. He does not, he's lost a son in the film as well, but he also has a daughter, which ends up being killed by the woman in black. She's a serial killer. Just going to put that out there now. So in the film, the basic points do remain the same. He does still help Arthur. He does still have, obviously, that dead son. But as I said before, he's now got a daughter. So he ends up losing 2 children to this woman instead of... well, instead of just 1, unfortunately. Now you come across Keckwick. Now that's how I was saying his name. I'm not sure if that is right. Again, my pronunciation of some things is not correct. I used to do a quiz. People used to take the mick out of me all the time for my pronunciation, so it wouldn't be the first time. Now, he's the pony and trap driver. Now, in the book, he's a quiet man who's hired by Jerome to help bring Arthur out to the Ilmarsh house and back again. But he also looks after Arthur as well. So he's supposed to take Arthur along Nine Lives Causeway and back again. That's his only job. But there's one night where he's unable to get out at an earlier time, but then he waits up and waits until the water recedes so he's able to go pick up Arthur. I think it's at like half 2, 3 in the morning, so that Arthur's not left alone overnight in Ilmarsh house. And that's a really caring thing to do when you find out sort of like what's going on there. So he's a man of few words, but he's a very steadfast presence. In the film, he's almost bribed to take that first journey, to take Arthur to Ilmarsh house. It's almost like he's very reluctant to go anywhere near it. He also seems belligerent as well when Arthur sort of like asks him to come back for him. He's almost like, well, I don't want to come back. And I feel like that's not who he is. That's not who he was supposed to be in the book. But obviously for the narrative of the film, they've made everyone very unhelpful, unwelcoming, and so they've just sort of kept with that with Keckwick as well. Now, I know the village isn't classed as a character. It's technically like a place. But I wanted to include it because in the book, it's a lively and lovely place filled with welcoming people. Everyone is aware of who the woman in black is, and they're aware of the curse, but they don't say anything about it, but they pretty much just get on with their own lives. When Arthur comes to stay, he stays at this beautiful inn. The landlord is very welcoming, always happy to lend a hand. And in fact, when Arthur comes back at 2:30, 3 in the morning, he wakes up, makes sure Arthur's okay, gets him fed, watered, and put to bed. The whole village, apart from every now and then, just sort of like whenever Arthur mentions Ilmarsh house, they kind of go, oh, don't really want to go out there, but they don't say why, and they just carry on with their lives, really. Now, in the film, it's almost flipped completely on its head. Everyone is openly hostile to Arthur the moment he turns up, apart from Sam Daly. The village itself is almost like it's in a state of depression constantly. Also, it seems to have kids killed far more frequently in the film than in the book. In the book, as I said, you hear about the odd one here or there. In the film, nearly every single child has died. It's very vindictive. I think at one point we at least see 7 kids killed in the film. 7, at least, I think. But in the book, we only hear really of 1 that that has definitely passed because of the woman. So I feel like they've completely flipped that warm, hospitable, feeling and village, and they've turned it to make it a darker film. So I get why they did it, but that's why I included the village as a character. So finally, you come to the woman in black. Now, she is the enigma up until the end of the book and the film. And then we find out who she actually is. But we also, it's always just in the corner of the eye, or she's sort of just there. You know she's there, but she's described at one point, you get a sense of malice and fear from her. The first few times Arthur sees her in the book, he sees her when he's attending a funeral. And he doesn't really feel anything from her. He just feels that she's just there for the funeral. And then sees her by the gravestones. It's only when he's over at Elmarsh House and sees her that he gets this malice and this hatred, and he feels complete fear while looking at her. Now, he also does get a sense of like overwhelming loss and grief whenever he's going like past the nursery. So it's sort of like you're getting all these different layers to who the woman is. So she's got this loss and this grief, because of the fact that she's lost her son, which you do find out. But also, you get this malice and this hatred because of the way that she lost her son. So you've got those layers there. And she's seen as a woman in the mourning attire, and a face that is ravaged and wasting away. And in the film, she's almost kept the same. But in the film, she seems more evil and more vindictive than anything else. Because, as I said before, in the film, she takes 7 children. But she doesn't kill them. She gets the children to kill themselves. I don't know. I feel like that's not really who she was. She just wanted people to feel the loss, but not... I don't know. Whatever reason they did that, that's how they decided to go with her. Now, I feel the direction they were going for was for a far more gothic feel. So they put the characters into this setting, which isn't exactly how it's shown in the book, which means, as I said before, they've got this hostility, they've got this anger, they've got this resentment. And Arthur starts off depressed as well. And so for this, I'm giving character representation a 4 out of 10. Now, the setting itself is Edwardian and features primarily in the village and Ilmarsh House. In the book, you see Arthur settled into his new house at the beginning. Then he tells of the story that led him to Ilmarsh House and the loss of his wife and future child. But the film is set in the identical time and place. However, again, due to a more gothic slant on the village and the underwriting grief that is very prominent that they put in the film, I feel like it takes away the juxtaposition of the happy and cheerful village, but the shadow of Ilmarsh House at the same time, which I entirely loved in the book. So because of this, I'm willing to give it a 6 out of 10 because it keeps the setting the same, even though it flips it on its head. So it stays in the same time frame, but it does give it sort of like a more gothic feel to it. So that's why it's a 6 out of 10. Now we come to the plot. Now, the most basic plot of the film and the book are basically the same. There's a spectre of a woman in black and a history as to how she became the malevolent spirit. We know, and it follows a gentleman called Arthur Kipps who goes out to deal with Ilmarsh House, who's a lawyer, comes across this woman, unearths all her history, figures out who she is and everything. And then he eventually believes in ghosts and he eventually runs away from the place. That's on the most basic level. Congratulations, it stayed the same. Yet, the 2 works of narrative, despite telling the same story, seem to do so in such completely different ways. Now, as I've said several times, the book starts with the main character happy. He's with his wife and stepkids on Christmas Eve. He's at home in the country, but due to his stepkids wanting to tell ghost stories, this is what brings him to remember Ilmarsh House in such great detail and to get this feeling deep inside that he needs to write it down, that he needs to let somebody know. Not until he's dead, but he needs to write it down so that somebody can read it after he dies. So he writes all that down so he can exercise this feeling and this ghost once and for all. So then he recounts how he came to be there, and how he encountered the woman in black, as I said, at the funeral of Mrs. Drablow, and then again at Ilmarsh House itself. When he goes to Ilmarsh House, he spots the woman again, but as I said before, he gets this overwhelming fear and this desire to be just away from everything. So all of this time he's getting annoyed by the villagers because they keep skirting around this underlying sort of like, oh, who is she? What does she do? You know, they know. Of course they know. It's a little village. Stories, that's how, ghost stories and rumors and fable tales start, but they just won't tell him. And so he's getting very frustrated because he's like, well, there's something going on, but nobody's telling me what it is or why it is. So he goes over to Ilmar's house and he tries to walk back across the causeway at one point because he thinks he might as well just walk back. It shouldn't be too much. But as he's walking back, he hears this pony and trap that's driving along, gets caught in a marsh, this child screaming for help, and then it sort of like all goes dead. And this shakes him to his core. He starts to believe at this point that there might be something untoward going on. He gets picked up by Kedwick, and he goes off back to the inn, coming to terms with what he's seen, what he's heard, and that they are almost as real as his day-to-day experiences. So, despite his experiences in this, he is still intent on finishing his business. So, props to him. I would have run after the first woman experience, but fair play to him. He decides to stay. So, as he's staying in the house, there are several goings on that make him unsettled. So he ends up getting a dog from his friend Sam Daly. And one of the mornings, so like during the night, she keeps barking at this nursery, like proper deep-throated growling barking, puts your like goosebumps, hair on edge, all of that. And then one morning there's this whistle that he doesn't hear but the dog hears, and Spider goes running out into the marsh. And as she goes running out to the marsh, she gets stuck and she almost drowns. Now, when Arthur rescues Spider, he looks up and sees the silhouette of the woman in the window at the nursery looking directly at him. So at that point, he sort of he's realizing that maybe staying and keep going back is not the greatest thing for him. But then he gets retrieved by Sam Daly, and he stays at his house until he's fully recovered, because at this point he starts getting a fever, he doesn't feel great, he basically just needs to recover. So he stays there until he feels better, and at this point he starts to unearth a little bit of the information, and he finally gets the information from Sam Daly as to who she is and the true history behind the hauntings and why they're there. So Sam Daly also lets loose that every time she's seen, a child dies. But nothing seems to happen. So Arthur Kipps thinks he's okay. So he goes back to London. He forgets all about Ilmar's house and all of those terrifying things that's happened to him. And he puts it out of his mind's eye. Until, I think it's a year later, and his new bride and his newborn son, and as they're out on a little pony and trap going around the park, he sees the woman by the tree, and the next thing you know, his wife and his child are dead. There was an accident with the pony and trap. It goes over, and both of them die. So he knows that that's why it's happened, and he does grieve and he mourns the loss. But then he goes on with his life. He gets the promotion at work. He meets another woman, and so on and so forth. So it's uplifting at the end as well as being very upsetting. Now the film, as I've said many times, much, much darker tone to it. So Arthur is on the edge. He's lost his wife in childbirth, and his son is looked after by a nanny because he has to try and work to make ends meet, even though he knows that he's ending up in debt. He's sent out to Ilmar's house almost like a punishment, just so that he can keep his job. Even though he's in mourning over the loss of his wife, the guy that runs the law firm doesn't seem to care, and just like, right, we've had enough. You shouldn't still be mourning. Off you go. Everything is very dreary and overcast. The train journey is dreary and overcast. Every time he meets someone, they're very openly hostile to him. The innkeeper says there's no room here, we're not going to put you there. When they eventually find room, it's in the attic, which was a child's room where three children little girls jumped out of a window and killed themselves. Cheerful. So again, as I said, the woman in black is telling these children to kill themselves, and Arthur Kipps keeps seeing the woman, and then someone will die. We've had 3 jump out a window, we had 2 drown, we had 1 burnt alive, 1 drank drain cleaner, I think it was, some sort of like, or lye. It was lye she drank. And it's like, it is dark. It is a very dark film. Now, the majority of occurrences are the same, but the film uses her presence a lot more than the book does. In the book, it's sort of like an undercurrent, but it's not really. Whereas the film is more sort of like, I mean, scared me a little bit, not gonna lie, sort of like hands on window panes. I'm more of a suggestive scared person rather than an all-out gore and horror. So if someone's screaming at me, I'm like, nah. But if you see a shadow or a reflection in a window or anything like that, that's got me going. Sitting back, being like, hand behind, hand in front of my face and everything. So she's more of a prominent presence in the film than she is in the book. And when Arthur realizes who she is, he goes into the marsh, recovers the perfectly preserved dead body of her child, lays it on the bed, and just goes, come and take him. He's here. I've reunited you. You don't have to be this vicious, vindictive witch anymore. It doesn't work. Just telling you now, it does not work. She gets what she wants, but she's still pretty a horrible person. Well, ghost. So, yeah, so the film makes you believe that once they've been reunited, everything's fine, because he goes to the train station with Sam Daly. He sees his child getting off the train and goes, nope, buy return tickets. We're getting straight back on and going out the other way. And then suddenly, the woman's on the other platform. His son is on the train tracks. A train is coming. He jumps off the platform onto the train tracks to try and rescue his son. You think they've made it, and then it turns out that both him and his son have been killed by the train. They are then reunited with the dead wife that he lost earlier, and they walk off away into the sunset happy as Larry, whereas everybody else is sat there going, oh. And then Sam Daly sees the woman in black. So you can only imagine who's going to die next, because I don't think there's any children left at this point. Now, the 2 narratives are very good. They are both very good. I loved the book. The film I loved for a different reason. It was the very first date that me and my husband went on. We went to go see A Woman in Black. And so it's got more of a nostalgia feel for me. But the 2 tones of the stories are completely different. And as I'm comparing the plots in this section, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. Because as I said, the most basic parts of the plot remain the same. But everything that made it such a nice, although it was a thriller, but also like a nice little happy story within it, isn't there in the film. It's very much absent. So the film in its own right is a good film. As I said, I've got nostalgia for the film. Very first film that me and my husband went to go see for a date. That's how long we've been together. Don't even want to think about that. It does keep you on edge throughout. As I said, she's a more prominent cause, and it's not a jump out and scare you. It's sort of like lights dimming, seeing reflection in mirrors, handprints on windows, things behind graves. It's sort of like the jump's coming, but it doesn't really jump. So I think you can just watch the film and appreciate it for what it is, which is a gothic thriller. And so for this, I'll give it a 9 out of 10, because I think it is a good film, and I think people that watch it will enjoy it. If you've read the book first, you might think differently about it, but as I said, in its own right, it's great. Now, as I've mentioned numerous times during this episode, the book and the film are vastly different narratives. They really are. The characters are different, the plot is different, the setting is similar but not quite the same. And although I do deeply enjoy the book and I do love the film, I have to admit that in regards to the overall film, how it's taken from the book, it's got to be a 3 out of 10 for me, unfortunately. It's just not as close as it should be at all. It's almost like it's a completely different narrative. Now, As I say every time, this is my own opinion. If you disagree with anything I say, if you agree with anything I say, if you like what I'm saying, do leave comments below. Don't forget to do subscribe to my channel so you're alerted whenever a new video arrives. As I said, I do try to get these out every week on a Wednesday. I'm never sure what the timings will be. It's however long it takes to upload to YouTube. So if there are any film to book adaptations that you'd like me to have a look at, do leave below in the comments. Somebody has mentioned Cat in the Hat to me, so that is on my list of ones coming. But do join me next time for the long-awaited, I'm sure, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, which both have such a very strong impact on my life. It's going to be interesting to see how we compare the two there. So thank you very much for watching this week's episode of The Contented Narrative. Join me again, and until then, don't forget to always keep it contento.